Hey internet friends. While our eyeballs have been glued on North Korea and the craziness taking place there, something huge is being covered up in Cuba. Making hasty videos is not really my style, but today I'm going to break my own rule because I feel like this issue is not getting enough attention. And I would love to get your input on what you perceive is happening while we're looking the other way.
So some U.S. government personnel who were working at our embassy in Havana, Cuba, on official duty, so they were there working on behalf of the U.S. embassy there. They've reported some incidents which have caused a variety of physical symptoms. We can tell you that on May 23rd, the State Department took further action. We asked two officials who were accredited at the Embassy of Cuba in the United States to depart the United States.
Are you hearing what I'm hearing? Today, State Department spokeswoman Heather Nauert told reporters that the United States had expelled two Cuban diplomats, kicking them out of Washington, D.C., after Americans at the U.S. Embassy in Havana had experienced unspecified incidents that resulted in physical symptoms. The severity also unspecified and the nature of these incidents unclear. Let's listen a little more.
The U.S. doesn't have a definitive answer on the cause or source of the incidents. Why did it ask those two Cuban embassy officials to depart the U.S.?
Some of our people have had the option of leaving Cuba as a result for medical reasons.
How many?
I can't tell you the exact number of that, but I can.
What was it, in the tens, dozens?
I'm not going to characterize it. I do not believe it was that large. Certainly not that large. But we had to bring some Americans home, or some Americans chose to come home as a result of that. And as a result of that, we've asked two Cubans to leave the United States, and they have.
In other words, this is a reciprocity thing.
I'm not going to call it as such, but we asked two people to go home.
So to clarify, after Washington, D.C. and Havana reestablished diplomatic relations back in 2015, now we have Americans at the U.S. Embassy in Havana being sent home for medical reasons as a result of unspecified incidents, while other Americans at the U.S. Embassy were offered a plane ticket home. Meanwhile, Cuban diplomats in Washington, D.C. were sent home on May 23, 2017. Yet we're hearing about this on August 9th. It does make the mind wonder, right? I hate to jump to conclusions, and that's not my intention with this video, as I like to keep the fear porn to a minimum, as I find it very unstimulating. But we've got to address this. The spokeswoman leaves many questions unanswered. My immediate assumption is that Cuba implemented biological weaponry on Americans at the Havana embassy. At least, that's what it sounds like, given there's a long and sordid history between Cuba and the United States. And of course, since this is a hasty video, I did a hasty search on Cuba's history of biological weapons. First off, let's get some fast facts going about Cuba. Number 1, they are one of the few remaining countries without a Rothschild central bank. Number 2, globalsecurity.org, a leading security think tank, reported that Cuba's biotechnology industry is one of the most advanced in emerging countries. And finally, number 3, perhaps that's why Cuba has a cancer vaccine that has treated many a patient. Interesting, right? So in my admittedly brief research, what I was really looking for was any foreshadowing of Cuban bioweaponry being placed in American media headlines. And boy oh boy, did I find what I was looking for. But the headlines I found were, well, a bit vintage, if you will. In 1997, Cuban President Fidel Castro compared the United States to a dragon and Cuba to a lamb, and warned that if the dragon tried to eat the lamb, it would find its meal poisoned, setting off speculation concerning Cuba's biological warfare capabilities. Let's fast forward a bit to 2002, when CIA news outlet CNN officially reported that the Bush administration believes Cuba had at least a limited offensive biological warfare program and might have been transferring its expertise to other countries hostile to the United States. Those countries hostile to the United States that they were referring to? Iraq, Syria, and Libya. Oh, digging a little bit further, but not nearly far enough, A Miami Herald article from 2007 stated that the former chief of Cuba's military medical services is calling for international weapons inspections of a secret underground lab near Havana, where he says the government is creating biological warfare agents like the plague, botulism, and yellow fever. That's a little eyebrow raising, right? So I looked, and yellow fever, botulism, and the plague, well, it really depends on which plague, are all short in duration, with symptoms lasting between 12 hours and 10 days. And if these illnesses don't kill ya, looking long term, the full recovery for botulism poisoning takes weeks to months. So if the State Department knew about these medical incidents in late 2016, as they claimed, I feel like we can rule out any of the aforementioned illnesses as Cuba's form of bioweapons based on the duration of the unspecified illness. That's all pure speculation, and by the way, Cuba has denied all of these allegations in the past, but let's hear a little more.
Let me just mention one other thing about this. The Cuban government has a responsibility and an obligation under the Geneva Convention to protect our diplomats. So that is part of the reason why this is such a major concern of ours, why we take this so seriously, and in addition to the protection and security of Americans.
Hold up, did she just cite the Geneva Convention, which basically outlines the rules of war? The Geneva Convention sets the basic limits on how wars can be fought, and these laws protect those not fighting. The Geneva Protocol prohibits the use but not the possession or development of chemical and biological weapons. So it's very curious that she brought up the Geneva Convention. Heather Newart's statements are so vague that anything I say is truly speculation. But when I sandwich her statements between the Geneva Convention, along with Americans working at the U.S. Embassy in Havana being sent home or brought home for medical incidents, and in the same breath she mentions the Cuban diplomats that were sent home from Washington, D.C., well, my question is, why is our full focus on North Korea? What do you think, internet friends? I am undecided. I feel that these statements on the vague medical incidents that occurred in Havana are either bait or cause for alarm. Who knows? Not me. Scott Anthony did an excellent video on this topic, so I'll direct you to his video. And as always, I look forward to reading your comments. Thank you so much for subscribing and supporting my channel on Patreon. Bye!